Broadcasting live from the Newsmax studio in New York City, here is Steve Malzberg.
Okay. I always breathe a sigh of relief when we could just digress a little bit and talk a little sports. And that's what we're going to do right now with the author of a great new book, Forgotten Sundays, a son's story of life, loss, and love from the sidelines of the NFL. We welcome in Gerry Sandusky, who's the sports director at the WBAL in Baltimore and the radio play-by-play voice of the Baltimore Ravens. Hello, Gerry.
Steve, how are you today? Great to visit with you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. And I know the first question that's going to be on everybody's mind is any relation to Penn State's Gerry with a J, Sandusky, and of course the answer is no.
Trust me, Steve, I know the first question too, because that's the one I've heard for the last 2.5 years.
Well, people, especially in it'll be on their mind and unfair if we didn't address it and just bring it out there.
And I completely understand it. Luckily, my mom and dad, for some reason, chose to name me Gerry with a G. And the difference between the 7th letter of the alphabet, G, and the 10th letter, J, has made all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. I was talking to you beforehand. I remember, because I often tell little Seinfeld anecdotes, when Elaine was dating a guy named Joel Rifkin, and she wanted him to change his name. Anyway, they were at Giant Stadium, and they paged Joel Rifkin because Kramer needed tickets, and he arranged the tickets. Long story short, the whole stadium hushes, and all the players, including Lawrence Taylor, who were on they used B-roll of the players, they all look up. And it was pretty funny. But let's move on. I often wonder, as a sports fanatic, a guy who did his first 12 years doing sports and pre- and post-game shows, Jets, Yankees, Devils, etc. I always wondered, what the life of, not only what the life of an athlete is, but what the life of an athlete's family is, and especially kids. Even from a young age, I wondered, hey, man, it must be great to be the son or daughter of, especially a son if you're a sports fan, of, a great baseball player or something. But then I'm thinking, but, they travel around all this time, and they're on the road, and they're engrossed in their profession. So, your dad, of course, and this book talks about your dad, and your dad was a player in the NFL with the Browns and the Packers, and head coach of the Colts and assistant coach under Don Shula. What was it like from that point of view of having a dad who you had to share? Sort of.
Yeah, and Steve, the book gets into that because what happens for families, happened in the 60s, happens today, is that the families get into the exact same rhythm of the season and the year as the coaches and the players. For example, if you are a coach's spouse or a coach's kid, your entire week in the fall revolves around Sunday. And if your dad's team wins on Sunday, there's usually a party at the house or the neighborhood on Sunday night. You don't worry about your homework. But if your dad's team loses, you don't say much that night. You do your homework. You stay out of the way. You don't see them a lot on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. By the time they resurface on Thursday, you're already getting tense again for the next week. So you learn to be very diplomatic as a kid, know when to talk, when not to talk, which topics to bring up. All that said, there's something special about Saturdays when, as the coach's sons, you get to go to practice, you hang out in the locker room, you get to know the players, and then the entire cycle repeats itself. And the offseason has a rhythm to it as well. And I was in college. I was a freshman in college. The first Sunday I spent in my college dorm looking out the window onto the quad, and I saw all these people milling around while a game was on, and it was the first time in my life the thought ever crossed my mind that everybody's life doesn't revolve around football and the NFL.
No, sure. I can imagine that. And the football season, September through January if you're lucky, but it starts in the summer. So, it may not be baseball, which I guess could run 6, 7, 8 months. And I don't know. They're long in their own way. But you grew up fine, and you had a great relationship overall with your dad. And this book is obviously a tribute to your dad. Talk about what was some of your best memories. You said meeting the players, etc. But what let's get specific here. Some of them are discussed in the book that you will always remember.
The times I spent in training camp as a kid in Philadelphia and in Miami, working in the equipment room, picking up the locker room, helping guys find what they need, fixing helmets, fixing cleats, doing all that stuff, odds and end jobs. because it put me in the same environment as my father at a time when he was most joyful. Coaches love training camp. Players, not so much, but coaches love training camp because they're with all these guys. They're doing what they love to do. They're helping young guys get better at their profession. And the pressure of winning and losing isn't full on just yet. So it's a special slice of time. And I had the great fortune to see my father not only in his workspace, but in his happy place, a place I can't say I ever saw him in the garage or paying bills or doing things around the house.
Right.
And so, when you see that as a young man, you realize there's more than just a job out there. You want to do something that's going to make your heart sing as much as possible.
Yeah, and of course, one incident that I want to talk about, and then the book gets much more personal and beyond football, which is very important, and I think, and some of it is painful. But let's talk about that elevator ride after the Super Bowl III, where the Jets pulled the upset of the century and beat the Colts, and Johnny Unitas and Don Shula and your father and you were in an elevator after that game?
Yeah, where somehow we get back in the hotel and I'm on the elevator. I'm a third grader. I'm on the elevator with these three great icons. I mean, this is the Mount Rushmore of football, and they've just lost the biggest game in NFL history. And it's the first time I've ever seen my father and my icons fail. So I'm already just kind of brain warped trying to process all this. And here I am with these three giants of the game. And as the elevator's going up, I absolutely just start losing it. I start crying. I'm bawling my eyes out. I can't believe this has happened. And as Johnny Unitas gets off the elevator, he turns around and kind of rubs the top of my head and says, "You're not the one who should be crying, Jerry."
Wow, that's something. And of course, now and in later years, it probably meant a lot more to you looking back on it than in the third grade, but I'm sure it was very poignant then as well. Let's talk about your dad, and let's skip ahead to the end. I mean, the tragedy of Alzheimer's, which affects so many families, and really, I guess, came to light with Ronald Reagan. Although we weren't privy to his to the deterioration, and that's a good thing, I guess. But it's got to be hard knowing that your dad was so vibrant, seeing him in those circles, and knowing him as you did in as a football coach, a football player, big important man, training camp, the whole thing, and then to see it end that way, it had to be, I guess, maybe tougher than usual, maybe not. I don't know.
No, I think it's just so gut-wrenching for anybody who has to go through it, Steve, as a caretaker, as a relative, as a friend, because for the person suffering from Alzheimer's, their world shrinks. They have an awareness early on in the disease that they're going downhill, and they start to get embarrassed because people they've worked with, they've known their whole lives, they can't remember their names, and so their social circle starts to shrink dramatically. And then their life shrinks to a safety point within their home. And then it's, for my dad, it was down to his chair, the bedroom, and the bathroom. And then he went into assisted living. And I'll never forget the day when I looked into his eyes and the spark of recognition was gone. He didn't know who he was, and he didn't know who I was. And I think that's the moment you start to ponder the value of a name. So many people have asked me since the Gerry Sandusky Penn State episode if I would have thought about changing my name. And having gone with my father, what I went through, the answer was an immediate no, because at that moment, when you're with somebody who's suffering from Alzheimer's, who's your father, you realize that your name is not your possession. It's not about ownership. It's about stewardship. What you do with what you have for while you have it. And he did great things while he had it to the best of his ability, and he left it to me. So no matter what anybody else did with a name that sounds exactly like mine, it's not mine to give away anyway. It's mine to hold in stewardship to pass to my kids.
I think that's a great way to look at it, and you should be proud that you're looking at it that way, and so will your kids be one day. Let me ask you this, and by the way, all that and more is in Forgotten Sundays, folks. It's just a great story on so many levels. Let me ask you about the Donald Sterling incident. Do you think that this does open a sort or take us down a slippery slope? Do you think now owners in all leagues, I point to Bill Maher, how he gets away with it, using the C word against Republican women, and he's a minority owner of the Mets. Jay-Z was a minority owner of the Nets. Nobody ever said boo about him. He had his songs with the B word and the ho word and all that kind of stuff, and supposedly wears a medallion around his neck that indicates black supremacy, and so does Carmelo Anthony, reportedly, according to the New York Post, wear that medallion around his neck. So do you think that this opens up a whole Pandora's box where owner after owner after owner is going to be investigated or scrutinized by private groups or whatever. Donations will be tracked, things they might have said. Where are we?
You know, I think it's a combination, Steve, with where we are as well as with the technology we're using. You know, we're having a conversation that wasn't possible 15 years ago.
Right, and by the way, we only got about less than a minute. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
So you watch what goes down with Sterling, and 10 years ago, that would have been a 3-month story that played out in the New York Times. Instead, it was a 3-day story that played out on everybody's cell phone, and social media took it and it just escalated it. I think social media and technology are accelerating everything, sometimes in the right direction, sometimes in the wrong direction, but we're now moving at the speed of electricity. And that's the thing we have to be careful of. Look, I think equality is critical for everybody. The golden rule is more prevalent than ever. Just treat people the way you want to be treated and leave it at that. And if you do, I think you'll find social media treats you as fairly as any other kind of media or any other kind of person.
All right. Gerry Sandusky, again, the book Forgotten Sundays. Thank you, sir. It was a fascinating conversation. Enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve.
Take care. All right, folks, we're coming back with Gimme 5 on the Steve Malzberg Show. Don't go away.